So the three arguments that I've heard about the House of Lords and whether it's operating well or should it even be in place. First is they're overpaid. The second one is they're not worked as hard as they could be. And then the third one is undemocratic and unelected. So if we could maybe talk about each one. So the first one, it being overpaid. I think a study was done in 2017 and found that 115 lords were paid on average an allowance of 11,000. And those 115 lords didn't make any contributions in the chamber or any written questions. And then I think it actually found that one member had claimed 50,000 in expenses, and again, no contributions. Do you feel that members of the House of Lords are getting overpaid or over-expensed for contributions that they're making?
It's a complex issue.
Yes.
There are a number of things, and if I forget to cover something, ask me again, bring me back to it, because I've got plenty to say about this.
Okay.
So the first problem really is peers claiming allowances but not actually doing anything. And I think an underlying problem actually is that the media, particularly print media, the newspapers, aren't resourced well enough themselves to do the investigatory work to identify that a peer is claiming a lot of allowances but not actually doing anything. You do need to be careful. You might see that a peer hardly ever makes a speech in the chamber, and never asks a question in the chamber. Might be they've not got the capability of doing that. However, they might be doing very good work on select committees. So you do need to study: ask yourself the question: why is that person in the House of Lords? What are they doing? What are they contributing? And it might be that they don't do a lot of work in the chamber, but they do a lot of work on select committees. So you just need to be careful on that. Whereas if you look at my record, which you've probably done, you would see that I make quite a few contributions in the chamber. So I know I'm invulnerable on that score, but actually I've done very, very little work on select committees. But I would absolutely agree that there is a problem with peers who claiming a lot of allowances and don't do anything to justify it. If you ask me what a solution would be, I would say that at the end of each session, every peer who's claiming allowances should have to write 75 words to say what they've done. What were they actually doing? What are their activities?
On that day?
Well, no, not each day. What have they done in the last session? So they claimed, they might actually not claim very much because they're not done very much. That's fine. Maybe they're doing other great things, so they're not actually concentrating on the House of Lords very much, but they're not claimed very much. So they might say, well, I claimed a couple of £1,000 and I contributed to these various few debates. But I've been running some other organisation, very commendable organisation. So in my case, I would say, if I was writing my 75 words, what I've been doing, I'd say that I've been contributing to defence debates, Ukraine debates, but also more importantly, working very hard on the criminal justice system, and I have concrete proposals for drastic reform of the prison system in respect of young prolific minor offenders. I'm also working very, very closely with the heavy haulage industry about a really serious problem about harassment of the heavy haulage industry by one or two particular police forces.
Okay.
So I could knock up something that's 75 words to justify. And I think if you have, 75 words to justify claiming tens of thousands of pounds is not unreasonable.
No, it's not reasonable.
And I think actually the need to justify your existence might concentrate a few minds. So that's the issue of people claiming a lot of money and actually not doing anything.
Sure.
And one of the previous Lord Speakers, Barrister Sousa, fairly robustly referred to this problem as well.
I appreciate your honesty and actually directness on that. That clarifies it a lot for me. So then building on that, the second point that I mentioned, which is not worked hard, and you maybe have said that sometimes people are claiming too much. I saw that the House of Lords, I think, is the second largest chamber in the world. The first being, I think, the government in China.
Yep.
I think
People's Congress in China. Yes.
Yes, and I think there are is it 805 House of Lords members.
Yep.
And it's actually very hard for each of them to contribute in a meaningful way in all the discussions that are going through.
We're doing too many issues.
So, okay.
Can we go back?
Sure.
Because you talked about the allowances being too high.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of issues to understand
Okay.
about remuneration. First of all, I'll just make the comment about the House of Commons quickly.
Yeah.
That, in my opinion, the MPs are paid nowhere near enough, and the output from the House of Commons, especially as ministers, is not very good, in my opinion. But we probably don't want to go there. But turning to the House of Lords, I was a Minister of the Crown, government whip in the House of Lords for 4 years. I then stepped down from the government over an internal difficulty. We don't need to go into that. However, it didn't take long for me to get back into political favour. But the problem was the pay was so poor that it simply wasn't worth my while going back into government, even though I could have got back in government, because I got back in political favour pretty quickly.
Yes.
Because the pay was so low. Simple as that. I couldn't justify to my wife being away from home so many nights for the amount of money.
That makes sense.
Because it's frankly pathetic. You know, a head teacher in an ordinary school would get just as much as me.
Yeah.
So I stopped being in the government,
whip.
because the pay just wasn't worth it. And then looking at the allowances, it sounds a lot of money, doesn't it? £350, £360 a day, and then we say just for turning up. I cannot tell you how demotivating it is for me. I want to retire from the House of Lords. Partially, of course, there's the spectre of Lords reform, but part of it is I'm 68, 2 years younger than the average of the House of Lords, and these comments about claiming £360 demotivates me. And yet there are plenty of things that I've left undone that I'm not going to do because I'm going to retire. We sit for about 150 days a year. So the maximum you can claim, if you claim every day, is 360 times 150 plus travel costs. But the travel costs aren't going in your back pocket, they're travel costs. But if you take tomorrow, so today's a sitting day, so I can claim my allowances for today. But tomorrow, I doubt very much I'll stop doing House of Lords work before lunchtime. But I can't claim for that. Earlier in the year, as part of my work looking at the harassment of the heavy haulage industry, I got out of bed at 5 minutes past midnight. I drove all the way to Melton Mowbray in Leicester from Portsmouth. We met the drivers of the heavy haulage company at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then we went with the abnormal load to Cawley services, saw some big problems that we don't need to go into, and then drove all the way back home using my own car and no mileage allowance for my car because there's no system for claiming allowances for that. So I did all that without any reward whatsoever. But it's out of the £360 I get for turning up. Next point is when I fell ill with a life-threatening illness, I was clinically extremely vulnerable. So I couldn't turn up to the House of Lords. Doctors advised, you must not go to London. So I couldn't claim any allowances. But I still was doing some House of Lords work. Actually, at that point, I was past normal retirement age for a professional person, so I should have arranged my finances so that didn't matter. and that was the case. But what would have happened if that happened to me when I was opposition frontbench spokesman for transport in House of Lords, say in 2009, and then I had that same situation, and I got a mortgage, and now I've got no income? And the next question is, I've been in the House of Lords since April 92, spent about, probably say cumulatively, about 18 months away on military operations or overseas aid operations. What do you think the pension arrangements are?
Yeah.
What pension have I got from that?
Yeah, probably not.
I've been here for 30 years. What's the pension arrangement? There is no pension. So it doesn't sound so much when you find out I've got no pension. To be honest, I got 4 years of pension from when I was a minister, and that was actually quite generous. But many peers won't have that. So it's not quite as attractive as you think. And I've had a very, my only income has been the allowances from 1990. Apart from when I was doing international aid or military operations, my only income has been House of Lords allowances. And you can do a calculation and realise, actually, for the level I've been working at, my overall income is very modest. And I'd like to think I'm a modest person with much to be modest about, but I've also had a modest income.
Is that the same feel with the rest of your colleagues? Actually feeling quite demoralised that, you're here as public servants, here to do good.
I'm more sensitive than others, I don't know. But with the constant criticism and criticism of the motives, and actually I say most of the criticism in the press is actually aimed at my political opponents, but I like and respect them, even though they're my political opponents. But nevertheless, they're still getting the criticism.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
No, that clarifies a lot of aspects, and I think a lot of people don't hear that.
And if you ask me what I would want to, what I've left undone, prison reform. We have actually the planets, for a variety of reasons, are in pretty good alignment, but our international security and defence situation is dire. We used to have a House of Lords Defence Study Group that visited military establishments up and down the country. Unfortunately, it's practically died. It's not extant at the moment. I really need to recreate that. I know how to do it.
Yeah.
I could be the secretary. I could find myself a Labour chairman to chair it and recreate it. I'm sure it will. There's a huge demand for it. We need to do it. But actually, what I want to do is retire.
Do you think?
Because I'm demotivated. I don't have the motivation to go and do that. But my calculation is actually, I'd rather retire.
That's saddening to hear, to be honest, Lord Attlee. Do you feel that actually there's quite a lot of colleagues, whether that's also or even in the House of Commons, that actually are supportive of the work of the House of Lords, but don't vocalise it? Or do you think this is just a political wave of it's very easy to attack members of the House of Lords and question them? Or do you think this is just part of the job, you being a public servant?
Well, you could argue, there's an argument to say, well, if you don't like it, don't do it. If you don't like the pay, don't do it. Well, that's what I've done. So I've stopped being in the government. I stopped being in the government. So I left the government in 2014.
Yeah.
And got back in political favour, but made the choice. But wait a minute, as an extremely experienced member of the House of Lords, I'm not saying I'm the most experienced, but I can argue that I'm an extremely experienced member of the House of Lords. And in fact, I spent quite a lot of time tutoring new members of the House of Lords, some who became in very, very senior positions in the House of Lords. But I stopped, even though I was actually had all the experience of how to do it. And then what's been happening is Prime Ministers, especially in the last few parliaments, to fill ministerial vacancies in the House of Lords, rather than offer attractive salaries, they've been offering peerages. So you see ministers come in, and their minister come in from outside. They're very good people. I'm not criticising their qualities, but they've come in, got their membership, their peerage, membership of the House of Lords, be a minister for about 12 months, and then realise actually the money doesn't add up, so they just step down as a minister, and then the Prime Minister appoints another outsider, gives him a peerage or her a peerage, and then they do 12 months, and then they retire, rather than say, actually, John Attlee was pretty competent at what he did, but the reason why he won't do it anymore is that the pay's so poor, so they carry on just appointing more and more members.
Junior members, or
well, they're very capable people.
Okay.
I don't. In almost all cases, they're very, very capable, but they're getting them to come to be a minister by offering a peerage rather than an attractive salary, and therefore they can't afford to do it very long.
Wow.
They can't. In many cases, they can't afford it. So if you, unless you had a huge private income,
yeah.
And in fact, the question to ask is is it correct that to be a Lord's minister and have a lifestyle commensurate with operating at that level, you really need to have a private income?
That's very interesting to hear. Okay. Another.
So you did have a related question, but I just wanted to answer.
Of course, that does clarify it. Of course, yeah. Another debate that people say is it's
size.
Size.
I can comment on size.
Yeah, let's go for size.
Yeah, so the House was well aware that we're far too many members, and it matters. It really does matter. And I think you touched on it when you said, and that because you've got so many members, it makes it harder to contribute. And you're absolutely right. Before 2010, when I was an opposition frontbench spokesman, if I got fed up with the government, the then Labour government, on an issue, I would go and see the clerks and I'd just say, right, oral question, next available slot, and I'd dictate the question. Now, because we've got so many active members, the number of inactive members doesn't matter. It's the number of active members we've got. We have to have a ballot. And I wanted to ask a question recently about the retirement age of prison officers, and I had to put my question in the ballot about 3 or 4 times before my question came up. Whereas in the past, it would be appropriate moment to ask an oral question, and I just put it down. And in debates, you're absolutely right in debates. So if you know what you're doing, in 5-minute speech, you can make some good points. The problem, though, is in 5 minutes you can't create an argument. If you see the difference, 5 minutes enough to make some points, but not enough to create. Now, the House recognised that we had far too many members. The Lord Speaker set up a committee to look at it, led by Lord Burns, a former senior civil servant. And he recommended that we set up a 2 out, 1 in process for some time. And using the actuarial evidence, we knew we could bring the numbers down to about 650 reasonably quickly. By that mechanism, it's all calculable, and they did the calculations. And the then Prime Minister, Theresa May, agreed to do that, and she did the best she could to adhere to that, and that's working quite well. But since then, we've had other Prime Ministers who I would say have made a diarrhea of appointments. And the numbers have gone up and up and up. But it's not in the control of members of the House of Lords, the size of the House of Lords. So it's extremely unfair to criticise the membership of the House of Lords and the institution of the House of Lords when the inappropriate size is being caused by the activities of the Prime Minister.
So then who should go about making such changes then? Because it is...
Well,
yes.
we're looking at the bill to exclude the hereditary peer, all of the remaining hereditary peers.
Yeah.
The scope for amendments is quite wide,
Yeah.
and we will be looking at the role of HOLAC in terms of especially the ability to veto on grounds of capability, probity and competence and experience,
Yeah.
but also maybe some mechanism to control the unfettered ability of the Prime Minister to appoint to the House of Lords.
Right. Okay.
But it is a really serious problem. It affects the capability of the House of Lords because we've got too many people, and I would say that the effectiveness of each individual active member of the House of Lords is inversely proportional to the number of active members of the House of Lords. And on the inactive members, it doesn't actually matter because they're not coming.
They're not, yeah.
Doesn't matter. We've got too many active members.
Fair enough. And then the point I mentioned earlier, it being undemocratic and unelected. I guess what's your argument to that? That it's people are selected.
First of all, the courts aren't elected either, and the Supreme Court has a very, very big effect because they can, especially we're drifting, I think, in the wrong direction. But the Supreme Court it is taking on a bigger and bigger role, and that's a separate subject. But they're not elected, and the judges aren't elected either, the general judges. But the House of Commons is the elected house. They've got the democratic credentials, and they decide who's going to be the Prime Minister. If you had an elected revising house, there are two problems. First of all, that elected revising house will say, well, we've got democratic credentials, so our view is just as important as the view of the House of Commons. But at the moment, ultimately, the House of Lords will give way to the House of Commons. When you look at the Rwanda Bill, which is highly controversial, we don't need to discuss the merits of it, but it had a really, really difficult passage through the House of Lords, several rounds of ping-pong to try and get agreement between the two houses, but ultimately the House of Lords gave way to the House of Commons because it's the elected house. Now, anyone proposing drastic reform of the House of Lords needs to answer this question. In your proposed new revising house, assuming you think you need it, do you still think it needs to be revised legislation, be an additional check on the executive and a source of expertise? And if it's a source of expertise, how do you think an expert, someone who's really good, why are they going to bother becoming elected, even if you offer them a safe seat? Second question is, if you've got your elected upper house, revising house, do you envisage that this house will be able to defeat the government or not? Because at the moment, it's relatively easy to defeat the government in the House of Lords because the party in government never has a majority. In the House of Commons, it's extremely difficult to defeat the government. It can happen occasionally on a minor issue, but in normal times, on a significant vote, the government never gets defeated. There was a time in the Brexit drama, for a variety of reasons, when the government was getting defeated, but in normal times it can't. Now, if the government can't be defeated in the House of Lords, and you have something like a Brexit bill, what will happen? The courts will come in and fill the vacuum because no one else can tell the government no. So then what will happen is you'll do a Rwanda bill, and to an even greater extent, the courts will start interfering, and instead of having several hundred peers with quite wide experience, to be frank, you'll get the Supreme Court justices, all 12 of them, decide on a point of law or reference to some other treaty obligation, say yes or no. And then they'll find it quite hard to undo that, whereas with the Rwanda bill, the opposition parties eventually made a political decision to give way. Absolutely crucial point. You want a revising chamber? the government needs to be defeatable.
Mm.
So the next point on democratic credentials.
Yeah.
If you want to be a revising chamber, an additional check on the executive. So, and I'll give you an example. Additional check on the executive. We were talking about cutting submarine cables, but by our opponents. And today we read that a nuclear submarine surfaced just next to a Russian spy trawler. The other day I asked a question about this very point, and my question to the government was a short, sharp, stabbing Attlee question. And the question was, do we have an agreed retaliation strategy? And I sat down. And the minister, I have to say, first of all, didn't give a very good answer. But secondly, as a result of all the questions, I think he took a rather different view to scrutiny by the House of Lords, because he was being asked really tough questions by people who knew what the right question was to ask, because they got the actual expertise to ask the right question. And agreed retaliation, it wasn't strategy, sorry. Strategy was the wrong question. It was agreed retaliation doctrine, which is slightly different, but it's absolutely the right question to ask.
I'm glad we're having this discussion, because that's one thing that's not really heard in the debate about why there should be a House of Lords, and I'm glad you've talked about why is this revising
the next point is that I am politically out of favour at the moment. So if there are some life peerages to be dished out to get a solution to House of Lords reform, I'm not likely to pick one up, because I haven't been very complimentary since 2016 about the variety of Conservative governments. But I can afford to be, because I'm independent. I don't owe my position in Parliament to anyone who is living. I have to say, of course, for all the life peers on the political benches, they owe their position in Parliament to knowing someone in the Westminster bubble. Almost none of them have got their seat in the House of Lords without knowing someone in the Westminster bubble. And the House is hideously London-centric, because to get your seat in the House of Lords, you need to know someone in the Westminster bubble. You'll know someone in the Westminster bubble if you're London-based. And finally, because we don't have any credentials, democratic credentials, sorry, we'd have credentials, but not. We don't have any democratic credentials, so we know our place. House of Commons, at the end of the day, rules the roost.
Yeah. Wow.
As soon as you give us democratic credentials, you'll end up with a nightmare, in my opinion.
It changes. No, thank you for putting all those examples about how it is this chamber that's there to actually scrutinise the House of Commons.
And no, scrutinise the activities of the government.
Activities of the government, yeah.